says AGI may not need a major breakthrough.
I've argued in the past that we achieved AGI in the summer of 2020. We know, I would argue, what AGI is, and we know how...
Please define it for me.
So what corporate form does a moonshot company take when the moonshot actually lands?
I think...
Inevitable, it's going to happen.
Other than the obvious quips about the Dyson swarm, blah, 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 I do think there's the seed here of the future of corporate governance in an age of what we might historically have called moonshots. Right now, we have traditional notions of C corporations that exist to maximize profit for shareholders or return for shareholders. We have various notions of B corporations or public benefit corporations that exist to, in addition to optimize public benefit. I think I can see here the nucleus of almost a third type of corporation that Elon and his board are pioneering, which is corporations that exist to achieve moonshots and that compensate accordingly.
Love that.
And I would love to see every S&P 500 company have as ambitious outcomes and comp plans corresponding to these for their CEOs.
Yeah. Hey,
and yes, we get the Dyson swarm.
And what happens when the not-for-profit dog actually catches the car it was chasing?
Yeah, a few thoughts. One, aside from the point that I've mentioned previously on the pod, which is that this is going to make for an absolutely amazing made-for-television movie
100%.
someday made by Aaron Sorkin, or maybe straight to cinema. I think there's an interesting teleplay playing out before us about the future of corporate governance. And I think this connects naturally with the previous story about Elon's own comp packages, which is that in an era when it's possible to start a not-for-profit with a moonshot goal, OpenAI was originally crafted with the goal of essentially front-running Google DeepMind to AGI and counterbalancing Google DeepMind, which Elon and others perceived as potentially creating a singleton, a single superintelligence.
They were that far advanced.
That was his concern. I had discussions with him around the time also this was happening. So OpenAI was originally intended in part to be a counterbalance, to create a competitive ecosystem. The problem is technology is advancing so quickly now that you can start a not-for-profit with seemingly an idealistic long-term goal, but the dog catches the card these days. If you set a moonshot goal for a nonprofit, what happens when it actually succeeds and the outcome is economically transformative? So the teleplay that plays out is everyone actually, after starting this not-for-profit, actually realized we're going to catch that car. We're the dog that catches the car, and this is probably better structured as a public benefit
The other thing is
corporation.
nonprofits are not designed to attract sufficient capital and to maximize the return on capital, obviously. And capital is still underlying, part of the innermost loop.
Doubly so. And this is the same parable that also played out with Anthropic. When Anthropic underwent its great schism and a number of folks, senior leaders from OpenAI, left OpenAI, they were initially just forming Anthropic to be a pure alignment lab. And then they discovered, well, actually, if we want enough funding for alignment, we need revenue. Well, if we need revenue, we need a model and we need capabilities. If we need a model and capabilities, we need to raise capital. Oh, wait, we need a for-profit public benefit corporation. So I think that the history, this sort of sad lesson we're learning over and over again, that's now being litigated in Elon v. Sam, that resulted in Anthropic's formation over and over again, is it's actually possible to realize moonshots now, and as a result, don't do it as a not-for-profit. Do it as a public benefit corporation from the start. Figure out the for-profit arrangement from the start, rather than fighting it all out in federal court after the fact.
Nice.
If you think the frontier models are getting worse at something you love, what do you owe the rest of us?
I would say, taking the high road, I would say if that's your experience, you have almost an obligation to humanity to create benchmarks to encode this knowledge that you have that you think isn't being accurately or fully or effectively reflected right now in AIs. If you were to create a Kotler bench that encodes all of your wisdom, all of your writing knowledge.
But it's not my wisdom. It's just basic writing skills.
Let me take a quick poll here in the room.
How do you actually prove a regression rather than just feel one?
That's a fair point. Again, encourage you as a scientist, as you say, to be rigorous in how you measure progress or lack thereof. If you're going to assert that there's been a regression in terms of creative writing capabilities, for example, create your own benchmark and then show the world.
How do you measure it? Yeah.
Show the world that there's been a regression and I will promise you, if you construct it well, you will get the frontier labs interested in including your benchmark in every other eval
As
suite.
an optimization function.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you will get your better creative writing.
Salim, do you want to have a final?
What year do humanoid robots outnumber the humans who built them?
Probably right. I've done the same extrapolations others have. You extrapolate the humanoids curve here, you find that in the early 2030s, the number of humanoids is predicted to cross the number of wheeled robots. I would assume there's relatively little alpha left at this point in any counter prediction that it's not going to be the case that humanoids pass humans by the end of the 2030s. What I think is perhaps even more interesting is, what does a post-humanoid robot form factor look like? Salim, I know you like to add lots of arms. That's your
wheels, anything.
That's your favorite body shape. But I think there are many problems.
And what comes after the humanoid once humanoids start to look quaint?
Shiva's
today,
a destroyer. Let's just point that out.
But I would point out there are more exotic body shapes that I would expect to see by 2040 that will make humanoid shapes look positively prosaic. I do expect by 2040 we're going to get our nanorobots, for example, our Drexlerian nanorobots. And I would expect many, many trillions of those to be in our solar system. And I think we look back from 2040 at this prediction of 10 billion plus, and we'll laugh at ourselves. This will be the equivalent of predicting atomic vacuum cleaners to help housewives from the 1950s. Well, of course we're going to have 10 billion plus humanoids, but what about the nanorobots?
Yeah.
Pivoting hard. Who ends up writing the global rulebook for AI disemployment?
I'll just comment. Okay. There's a bit of obvious historic irony here. China has come full circle from communism to anarcho-capitalism back to communism again. And it's maybe just a bit ironic that China is leading the world in terms of, call it socialism with Chinese characteristics or communism with Chinese characteristics, for how to handle AI disruption and AI disemployment. It would be an ironic, I think this falls under the category of
the most ironic outcome.
The most ironic outcome tends to be the one that we live in, where China is setting global standards for how to deal with AI disruption for employment. It's a very strange future that we live in.
Salim, you must have an opinion.
The arms race is real. So what is the actual prize the winner walks away with?
You don't know how to respond to that.
I think we need to
Alex speechless for the first time ever.
Up-level the conversation.
No more about grandmothers, okay.
Just up-level just a little bit. I don't buy the premise that China, through internal policies, is somehow hamstringing themselves in a race for AI supremacy against the US. Parenthetically, the race to AI supremacy, I think, is perfectly real. It's not fictitious. It is a real arms race, and it's a real arms race not just for AI itself, but for what comes after AI. When we have superintelligence, that's going to unlock so many, I think, transformative scientific innovations and discoveries and inventions, and that's really what the prize is.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet.
That's right. Yeah. If there's new physics, for example, I have financial interest in a company, Physical Superintelligence, that's working on superintelligence for unlocking new physics and new applied physics. That alone is a prize worth an international arms race over. And I just to the claim or the assertion that somehow China, by introducing policies that are notionally worker friendly in terms of AI substitution for labor, is somehow hamstringing themselves, I think it's preposterous. There are a variety of other industrialized countries, including Germany, that have policies of favoring small and medium-sized businesses when it comes to automation. I think China, if anything, this is a way from an internal policy perspective for China to ensure a certain level of human employment while also creating state incentives top-down for creating new types of jobs that are AI adjacent. I don't think they're tying themselves up at all.
So they manage the PR of AI through this. Like they have high enthusiasm about AI. They want it to be high.
It's no different in some sense from our government constructing policies with the hyperscalers for requiring that hyperscalers pay their own electricity supply bills. No different, except it's at the consumer level rather than at the enterprise hyperscaler level.
How far does Demis Hassabis himself think we are from AGI today?
Yeah,
take it away.
I chatted with Demis 10 plus years ago at this point, and at the time, he thought it was 5+ major breakthroughs that would be needed to achieve AGI. Now we're down to 0 or 1. And I don't disagree with Demis. I've argued in the past that we achieved AGI in the summer of 2020, no later than with the discovery of, or the publication rather, of large language models or few-shot learners, which was the GPT-3 paper. We know, I would argue, what AGI is, and we know how...
Please define it for me.
If the breakthrough already happened in 2020, what have the last 5 years actually been?
I think it's just incremental improvements after the fundamental discovery, which I think...
Just like DNA and in RNA and Darwinian evolution were the seeds that led eventually to humanity. It was born then and progressed.
I would make maybe even a slightly stronger statement, which is the notion that general intelligence is capable of carrying out a variety of human level or near human level tasks based on the fundamental discovery, again, discovered no later than summer of 2020, that you can achieve general intelligence by taking general human knowledge and compressing it. That was the fundamental discovery underneath large language models. We realized as a civilization, certainly no later than 2020, that you could carry out a diverse and general range of tasks with models that had compressed human knowledge. That's all that we needed. Everything else, the discovery of refinements of transformers and everything, it's just incremental improvements to that fundamental discovery.
Dave, any thoughts on this?
On the ASI Pill, we take this seriously. So where does this whole project actually end?
I think there's a broader program here that we're just seeing the very beginning of. If you look back at there were strains, I've spoken about this on the pod in the past, of Russian cosmism. The Russian cosmist philosophers like Tsiolkovsky spoke about humanity's common task of taking every human who's ever lived and finding ways using technology to bring them back to life. And I think starting with extinct species is just a special case of what technology I do think will enable us to do, which is to reach back into our past light cone, take every species that's ever lived, bring it back in whatever form, even if it's as a hybrid or as a computer simulation, and also reach back in time to our past light cone and take every human who's ever lived, not just at the species level, at the individual level, and computationally or using other advanced techniques, reconstruct them. I think that's a far more exotic and interesting future than just Jurassic Park petting zoo for dinosaurs. Imagine bringing back every human who's ever lived.
Closer to the present, which gets the $1 trillion first? Health span drugs or AI labor?
So I'll field that one. I think the argument goes that the GLP-1s are ultimately health span drugs, human health span drugs. And so what we're seeing here, in some sense, on a single chart, is a race between whether there's more revenue in enabling human actors, human labor, to be economically productive in the economy through increased health span on the one side, or whether capital is more efficiently and effectively invested in AI labor on the other side. And I think the outcome of these two respective curves determines whether the future light cone of our economy is ultimately dominated by AI, something that resembles AI, or something that resembles biological human.
And when do we stop dying faster than medicine is improving?
I agree, and I also think when we speak about longevity escape velocity, which I do think is likely for the record, perhaps sometime by the early 2030s, if not earlier, I do think that the GLP-1 drug class and everything it evolves into over time, if I had to guess what is the likeliest way that LEV plays out, it is probably the GLP-1 class. And I think the economy is reflecting that. If you look at companies that are worth almost $1 trillion or worth more than $1 trillion, either right now or expected to be publicly traded in the near-term future, there are only a handful. You've got a few AI companies. You have SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic, and then you have Eli Lilly, which has been publicly traded for a long time, but is either already at $1 trillion or about to cross $1 trillion on its present trajectory. And I think that's the market speaking very clearly that longevity drugs and AI are the obvious industries of the future.
Yeah, agreed.
What does AI feel like to a consumer in 2028? Or are we asking the wrong question?
I almost think we're asking the wrong question here. I would like to reframe,
please,
because I think the question behind the question here is, what will AI feel like to consumers by mid-2028?
Yes, it's fair.
And I think the past 6 months of industry history have taught us consumers are not actually great customers for AI, at least not state-of-the-art AI. OpenAI infamously at this point, tried to turn consumers into power users for reasoning models and failed, and has had to pivot over to enterprise. They had to basically shut down their consumer video division. They've shut down a number of other divisions in favor of code-generating models that are recursively self-improving and targeted at enterprise use cases, because enterprises have the money and the desire to use advanced reasoning capabilities. So the adjacent question I would ask is, what will an AI feel like to an enterprise rather than to a consumer in mid-2028?
Okay, then. What is the AI consumer dream of 2028, and why is it probably wrong?
What I think you want to hear.
What's that?
Which is you want to hear that mid-2028 you're going to have an AI exocortex that's a quasi-upload of you, your digital twin in the cloud that knows everything about you and your life and is fully optimizing your meat body existence, knowing what it knows about you. I think that's what you want to hear. I don't think that's actually how things are going to play out, though.
Okay, please.
I think what AI will feel like in 2028 from a consumer perspective, yeah, sure, we'll have better augmented reality, we'll have better robots in the streets. All of that, I think, is already essentially priced into the market. What's not being priced in right now, the non-obvious insights are new scientific discoveries that consumers aren't the ones who are driving.
Okay, well, you're taking it to parallel. So let's put that in the column of industrial, right? When Lila Scientific and Colossal are creating breakthroughs at a rate, or, frankly, isomorphic labs.
The question as constructed is basically, what products is Apple going to launch in 2028? Because these all map onto Apple product categories. So you get your smart home, you get your robots, you get your wearables of all sorts. Maybe if we're lucky, we get ingestible robots. We get all of these things. But I don't think that's the essence of what AI is going to feel like to a consumer. And I don't think that's the core or the frontier.
Salim, what do you think?
So if not exocortex, what does a consumer get in 2028 that actually feels new?
I'm generally, so I'm a big fan of Werner Vinge, who wrote extensively about what the near future AR, VR, metaverse, if you like, would look like. I do think we get that. I do think it's just a matter of time and battery energy densities and other progress. So by 2028, do I think we get Werner's smart glasses with compelling long life augmented reality or mixed reality? Yeah, sure. But I also think
After all that.
Oh boy.
but I also don't think it matters an enormous amount. Like, yes, it'll be great and it'll be popular.
By the way,
And the deeper bet, where does the human body actually meet the machine?
ponder a vision.
I think we are merging with the machines. I do think augmented reality and wearables are part of the solution. I think ingestibles are going to be part of the solution. I'd be sorely disappointed if by the end of this decade we don't have many people swallowing computers. We see the beginnings of it right now with pillbot type form factors. I did a projection, something I think friend of the pod, Ray, would be proud of. If you extrapolate the typical size of a computer needed, this is over history, over the past 15 to 20 years, needed to achieve a gigaflop of compute, which historically, if you look back at Apple new product announcements, Apple historically has waited for new devices to pass a gigaflop before they release it. It's true with the original Apple Watch, true with the original iMac, true with the original iPhone. If you extrapolate then the typical size of a computer that at time of launch passed a gigaflop, you extrapolate that forward, you find that by not mid-28, but by the mid-2040s, around the time Ray says we're going to hit his version of a technological singularity, the size of a computer hits approximately the size of a eukaryotic human cell. So what am I most excited about? Well, I have a laundry list, but I think if you extrapolate the progress of the size of the computers running the AIs, we're going to have cell-sized nanomachines running those AIs, and I think that'll be incredibly exciting.